Welcome back to In the Saddle With. It's time for episode 2, and as you can see, I'm delighted to be joined by Luke Morris, 5-time champion all-weather jockey. Before we get into the chat with Luke this time around, if you've been enjoying the content so far on this particular podcast, don't forget to subscribe via iTunes or Spotify, wherever it is that you get your podcast from, and indeed to the YouTube channel, the Winners Enclosure YouTube channel and podcast. So take a look at there, subscribe, that would be much appreciated. Hopefully you've been enjoying the chat with Sylvester de Souza last week, and it's on to this week's chat with Luke Morris. Hi, Luke. You've been for your run already today?
I have, yeah. Good, Chris. Keeping busy and keeping myself nice and trim. Praying for racing to start back soon, hopefully.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we're all in that particular boat, aren't we? You say keeping yourself trim. Weight isn't really ever a struggle for you, is it?
No, I'm quite lucky in that I'm naturally quite a lightweight, and just through lockdown I've tried to sort of maintain my weight at a complete level by, like I say, doing lots of running, lots of cycling, and been busy riding out sort of the last 3 or 4 weeks. So I think I'm even a little bit lighter than usual. So I've turned into a bit of a Strava addict, so it's kept me nice and trim and kept my weight perfect.
Yeah, I've seen some of your running stats. So you were during like the course of racing as it's going on normally, are you someone that when you get to the track you'll have a run round?
Not really, no. Like I say, I'll walk the track etc. to see the ground, but I used to enjoy running when I was at school, and kind of just just got a bit in the racing bubble and ignored it really. But it's been nice to while I've been off to almost kind of revisit it, and it's something I quite enjoy doing. It, start the day right, and it puts you in a good frame of mind for the day ahead, really, I feel.
Yeah, looking at some of those times you've been clocking, you might not just be racing on horseback in the future, because what's your 5K time like?
5K 7:25, which was pretty swift, and then I seen I think Keith Donahue did it in under 17 minutes, which was incredible. So I'm training hard just to try and tighten them times up all the time. And
you did your half marathon the other week, didn't you?
Yeah, I did my first half marathon, and I was pleased with that time. So I think the next step's trying to train for a marathon.
Absolutely. Good luck with that. I did a half marathon last year, and I won't be training for a marathon. Definitely not. The thought of that being halfway, absolutely no chance. So running something that you got back into while you've been forced into lockdown. In terms of racing, when and how did that start for you? Was it a sport that you were brought up in, or just gained an interest in? What was it?
Basically, all my sort of family were in it in some regard. Obviously, my uncle was a jockey when I was growing up, Jason Tate, and I always remember. I think I was probably 6 at the time. He won the Hunt Cup at Royal Ascot on a horse called Refuse to Lose, and I think I was probably 6 at the time. And after that, I kind of got the bug, and I ended up moving to Newmarket when I was maybe 6 or 7, and I see the horses every day on the gallops, and I just knew that from that stage it was for me. And I was almost a little bit obsessed from that age, watching the likes of Dale Army, Swain, Saki, and all those horses growing up. It was for me from then. It was just a countdown till I got to 16 till I could ride in the race, really.
Yeah, so it was something from a very young age, and you, as you say, uncle already a jockey. You moved to Newmarket when you're young. What was the reason for moving to Newmarket? Was that just a decision that your parents took? Yeah,
it was actually my parents split up when I was 6 or 7, and my mother's side of the family were all in Newmarket. So, it worked out that we ended up there, and like I say, it worked out perfectly for me. And so I think I started riding out for Michael Bell when I was 12 years old, every day before school, and doing even stables every day afterwards. So I was fairly obsessed from quite a young age, really, and it like I say, it's worked out a treat.
Yeah. So Michael Bell is the yard that you started with when you were basically still a kid. Did you immediately sort of leave school and then go and do the course at the racing school or something to become an apprentice?
Yeah, I was quite lucky in that being in Newmarket, they'd actually set up a new scheme which still goes to this day, where you get to take every Friday off school and go to the racing school. And for someone who I wasn't too keen on school, didn't enjoy education particularly. It was perfect. I got a day off school every day, and then I ended up doing my apprentice course while I was on. I think I was on the Easter holidays, so everyone on the course had left school, and I was doing it on my Easter holidays. But say the racing school was very good to me. Obviously, let me do that and take a day out of school, which was perfect.
And in those early stages, when obviously, as you say, you decided that you were going to become a jockey or try to become a jockey, because plenty of people want it, not everyone can. You decided young. Who were the role models? Was it your uncle? Was it top riders that were around at the time? Who was it that you were looking up to?
I think probably at the time, like say, it was a time when Frankie was winning all the Group 1s on the likes of, them fantastic Godolphin horse at the time, Dale Army, Fantastic Light, etc. So I'd say he'd have been my role model growing up. I know at that sort of time, Jamie Spencer I think he was champion jockeys. He was someone I admired at the time, and I'm good friends with him now. So it's nice that that's worked out. But generally, probably Frankie would have been the guy that most people my age would have been looking up to.
And was that strange when, having looked up to them as a kid growing up in Newmarket, absolutely obsessed by the sport? I mean, it's a little bit like, in that sense, a kid who likes playing football suddenly turning up, signing for Barcelona, and playing alongside Messi. Was it a bit like that? Were you a bit starstruck at first?
I probably was. I think probably every apprentice is when they first go into the rain room, because it's a little bit of a daunting place, really, because you're out of your comfort zone, but it's quite a welcoming place once you get in there, and everyone gets on well, and it's a good place to be. But them initial kind of first year or so, it is quite a daunting place.
And when you go into the weighing room for the first time, and there are those senior pros, of which you are now one, is the kind of a kind of initiation process whereby someone puts their arm around you and looks after you a little bit, probably someone that knows you from the yard that you work at, but there's also just like, these are the rules and this is how it works, and you kind of give them a bit of a guide?
Yeah, I think definitely. Obviously, me, when I first started off, there was Haley Turner, Jamie Mackay, Richard Mullen, a few others at Michael Bell. So they were very good to me, looked after me, and kind of showed me the ropes. Obviously, starting off, but I think things have changed probably to this day and age, where the young lads are probably more accepted now in the weighing room, because there is generally quite a younger base of riders now. But it's probably slightly more welcoming now than it might have been starting off maybe 10, 15 years ago.
Yeah, I think that's probably true across various sports, to be honest. And as you said, maybe just a little bit more of a welcoming environment for the youngsters that come through. In those early parts of your career, what were the highlights?
Obviously, starting off with Michael Bell, I always think starting off, you really need that. You need that horse to be riding in heritage handicaps, and you're always hoping for that Channel 4 winner or that good winner just to almost set you on your way. And I think my first one, when I just lost my 7, was a filly called Juniper Girl. She won the Northumberland Plate, which I think she won by a short head or something, which really kind of set me on my way, and it got me busy in terms of I was getting plenty of rides and riding winners Monday to Friday, etc. And he was very good to me and guided my career, and almost not letting me rattle through my claim too quickly. And so he, looking back now, I probably didn't appreciate it at the time, but he guided my career perfectly. And he sent me away to America one winter, Australia another, and it probably made me the person I am today. And it helped me kind of the longevity of keeping going as a jockey.
Yeah, you said that you weren't aware of it at the time. At the time when a trainer is trying to protect your claim, and you're maybe on a bit of a roll, as you said, Northumberland Plate and things like that, is there almost a sense of frustration that you're being held back sometimes when you're young?
I was at the time. I was completely, I thought he was, trying to sort of ruin my career, and I was very, very young, very naive, and I think a lot of riders would have been in the same situation. And I never rode through the winters or on the weather when I was younger, so it. Otherwise, I'd have wrestled through my claim and been probably 18 and had no claim, and you'd have been on level par at the time with likes of Kieran Fallon, and I would have just got completely lost and probably forgotten about. So he was very good to me, and it just gave me that bit of experience and time to strengthen up as a rider that realistically I needed.
And do you see that now with young lads coming through, saying it's a more welcoming place? Do you see that those young lads coming through as apprentices and the ones that sort of everyone wants riding straight away, they impress straight away, they're outstanding value for their 7? Do you see the same thing with them, and almost do you see it as a role to reassure them maybe that, look, I went through the same and you've got to be careful?
Yeah, like say, I think like say someone, for instance, like Angus Villiers, who's a very good young rider. You see Rich Hughes, he's kind of reined him back. He rode very little through the winter, and like say you almost get these sort of certain trainers that will just they'll take the 7 and take the 5 while it's great value, and then as soon as you lose your claim, they're using the next kid on the block. So like say, it's important that you get that experience and you build a good base of contacts going forward. So I think it's very important that you're with the right guy who can guide your career the right way.
And as we said, yours started with Michael Bell. He had some really good horses around that time, but the person that nowadays you're most closely associated with is Sir Mark Prescott. I guess when you were starting out, it would have been Seb Sanders that was Prescott's man, was it?
Yeah, I think Seb would have been the stable jockey then, and like I said, they had plenty of good horses at that time, like Confidential Lady, and I think I rode a couple of times for him when I was apprentice, and so it's worked out nicely because we both get on very well professionally, and he's a fantastic boss.
And so when did that link up start then? Was it just as a couple of rides when you were an apprentice? Like how did it develop into being Sir Mark Prescott's main man?
Well, initially, before I lost my claim, I actually went to Stanmore's and almost rode as a bit of a freelance, and then started. I got very lucky for Clive Cox. Rode a couple of listed winners, group winners on Perfect Tribute, June Light, a few others, and then ended up getting on Gilt Edge Girl and win the Group 1 winner. I think it was my first season as my claim, which where obviously when you're a young lad coming out your claim, you need a good horse to step you forward, and she kind of fitted that bill. But I think the next season, things weren't going so well with Clive, and we kind of had a couple of little fallouts, and I was approached by Sir Mark to come in and ride work and see how we got on, and then things went from there. And I think one of my first rides for him was a filly called Clinical in the Princess Elizabeth on Oak State. I think it was one of his first runners that year, and she won a Group 3. So it was almost a perfect start to kind of a new combination, really, and it just gave me that confidence going forward riding for him.
What's he like to ride for? Does he give you many instructions? Does he give you lots of confidence? What's he like as a boss?
He's fantastic. Like I say, we'll go through the race, very, very detailed with a fine tooth comb, and he has his paper marked out on what every horse in the race is going to do. Say I would have already been through the race earlier on in the morning, and say we'll plan ahead at what the best case scenario will be, but we'll also have plan A, B, and C, and say it's nice now that obviously I've ridden for a few years, so I've got that bit of leeway where if something's not going right, I can say use my head and do what I feel is best.
Yeah, so as you've gone and that relationship between you has matured and the trust matures as a result, you almost have, yes, there's a plan, but there's a bit of a free rein that if something changes, you've got the confidence to change and go in afterwards and say to him, this is why.
Yeah, like I say, obviously I've got the confidence in that. I know that if I make a decision that I'm doing it in the best regards for the horse and Sir Mark, and he's got the confidence in me that if a race isn't going to plan, that I'll change tactics or change my plan accordingly, really.
And do you go in there most days to ride out at home?
I go into Sir Mark's on a Tuesday and Friday, and we'll I could sit on probably 6 or 7 horses on each day. So say I'm able to get to know plenty of horses in the stable.
And do you have, obviously he's famous for his campaigning of his horses, do you have any input into that, or do you just ride him where you're told to ride him?
So Mark, I always think he assesses his horses very early on to whether they're going to be a 3-year-old going forward or a early season type, and we'll work them to see what level they are and how they're going to be campaigned. And like I say, obviously my input in the morning is quite vital as to going forward what these horses do.
Is that the lamb?
The lamb was just ran into the dining room. Yeah. I knew I should have shut the front door.
Have you got I've seen a few of your pictures on Twitter. Have you got a few different animals sort of around and about the place as well as the horses?
Yeah, I've got a couple of horses having a break, a couple of miniature ponies, a lamb, a couple of dogs. It's fairly manic.
How on earth did you end up with a lamb?
I was quite bored, and I think James Doyle ended up getting a couple of lambs and a couple of goats. So I thought, why don't I get a lamb as well and see what it's like? And thankfully, it's fairly easy to look after.
Yeah, well, I was brought up on a farm, so I know that the relatively easy to look after, but it does seem like a bit of a random pet to have acquired. Yeah. But particularly to be coming into the dining room, maybe back in the dining room in a different way eventually.
Yeah, it could well end up in the dining room, on the dining room table.
Exactly. Yeah, back to the career then. So he assesses those horses fairly early. He'll know what they are. Are you then, if you ride one in a race, say his usual MO, I suppose, is they find some improvement when they go up in trip a little bit. Are you sort of saying to him at that stage that we want to be good, this will have more when it goes over further, or does he just work that out for himself?
I think, to be honest, he like I say, he's assessed them on their homework, and he knows going forward that the plan ahead. But obviously you do get a few sleepers in. I remember Celestial Path a few years ago. So he ended up finishing third in the Racing Post Trophy and fifth in the Guineas. And his work at home wasn't that great, but he was one that on his homework he could have been a handicapper. He could have been a we didn't really know, but he shocked us first time, and he ended up going down that pattern route. But so a lot of time their homework decides which route they go.
You said there that you go into St Mark's Tuesday and Friday, so that leaves you plenty of other days free for getting around and about other yards. Because you ride for so many people, are you a busy jockey in the mornings with other stables as well?
I try to be, yeah. Like I say, this season I've been going down to Ed Walker's once or twice a week, and I struck up a really good partnership with him through the winter, and he's got a lot of nice unexposed and well-bred horses going forward. So hopefully that's a link up I can use to good effect this year. And Harry Dunlop's I've been going in there quite a bit, and a few others in Newmarket as well. Robert Cowell, Gay Calloway, a few others. So Ed Dunlop. So trying to keep busy, and I always think the harder you work in the mornings, the easier it is for your agent to get on them in the afternoon. Yeah, exactly. You're just building up those contacts, and I suppose it is a lot about contacts, isn't it? As, that's how you get your chance on the track. And as you say, it started with St Mark, a couple of rides as an apprentice, and you never know when the next crucial relationship to your career is going to come from. Exactly, and like I say, it's all about getting them chances. Once you get them chances, you have to take them with both hands. So, like I say, hopefully, I always think if you make your own luck, and if you work hard, the luckier you get. Very few are harder working than you, I don't think, Luke. You must rack up some miles. I think you're year on year really the busiest jockey around, because to a large degree, I suspect that's because you stick around for the winter. You don't go abroad. Yes, you'll go for a night at Maidan. You'll go and ride an evening there, but you're usually back at, say, Lingfield the following day, aren't you? Yeah, like I say, I enjoy being busy, and say I'm always hungry to ride winners and ride good winners. So you know, it's great to get those trips to Maidan, and so it's actually, you know, it sounds a lot worse than it actually is, because the flights wise, it's almost like, you know, you're asleep on the way over it in an evening and sleep on the way back. So but obviously clocking up the miles is tough, but I'm lucky to have a full-time driver, which takes the main strain away, really.
Yeah, takes away a good chunk of the, you know, you can do something else, be it a sleep, a bit of prep, whatever it is, when you're racking up those miles. I mean, how many miles would you have put in last year on the car?
I think it's usually roughly around 80,000 a year, so it's a fair old whack. So especially with obviously Newcastle now, plenty of meetings, it's almost put an extra 10,000 a year on the on the travel.
Newcastle, obviously an all-weather track nowadays. Mentioned right at the start, 5-time all-weather champion jockey. Is the all-weather jockey's title something that right at the start of the all-weather season you actively set your stall out to try and win?
I think that obviously I'm always planning on being busy in the winter and riding plenty of winners. So I think if you don't go into it, you know, not wanting to ride more winners than anyone else and do better than anyone else, I almost feel like you're undercutting yourself a bit. Like say, I always think whenever you go into any sport, you want to be the best you can in it, and you want to be the champion or whatever. So every winter, I aim to try and be champion, and I think I've either been first or second pretty much every year since I lost my claim. So so I've had a good go with it on the weather, and you know, I do enjoy riding through the winters here.
Yeah. Do you look forward to the all-weather season? Because for a lot of people, the flat season is about the turf, and you'll obviously enjoy that and getting on some of those really nice horses. But is there a nice feeling to the all-weather season in the sense that suddenly you are the man in demand? You're the one that pretty much everyone is wanting on their horses if they can get you, and you'll go with a full book of rides, and a lot of them have got a good chance.
I wouldn't say I look forward to it in any more than the turf, really, because obviously, you know, in a normal year, this time of year on the turf, it's a very exciting time where you're hoping you know, almost your geese may have turned into swans, and you're hoping you might have a good horse to look forward to. So I wouldn't say that, but you know, obviously through the winter, you know, you kind of are a little bit more of a big fish in a small pond situation. So it's nice to be able to get on some, you know, short price fancied horses day in, day out. And so especially last year I rode quite a few for Charlie Appley and Godolphin, which was an attachment that I hadn't had before. So you're hoping that through the winter you can get on them bigger stabled horses that you might not get in the summer so much.
Exactly, and you said there the Ed Walker link up. That's a yard that gets some really nice horses, and that's a link up that it seems has come through the all weather as much as anything else. Yeah,
like I say, I've ridden listed winners for Ed in the past. A couple of fillies, you know, for a few years ago when he trained in Newmarket, and you know, just happened I got on a couple of horses through the winter, and you know, struck up a good partnership. And say he looks to have some, you know, he's got plenty of horses for likes of Lord and Lady Lloyd Webber and Lady Bamford, and some really well-bred horses. So you know, hopefully there could be a couple of nice horses in there for the year going forward.
Yeah. A lot of our viewers, if they're watching on the YouTube channel, or listeners via the podcast, will be punters largely. For their benefit, I guess, how does all-weather racing differ from turf racing? Because it's still horses running around in a circle, but it's different, isn't it?
Yeah, I think the thing of all-weather racing is track position is vital, and draws a lot more important, and you know, the track position you get in the first 100 yards of race counts for so much on the all-weather than it does potentially going a mile and a half at Newmarket. And I always think on your weather, you've almost got to study your races a little bit deeper just to know what everyone's going to do. And you know, there are times when you can gain an edge and gain a bias by you know, just knowing what everyone else is going to do. Because say on some tracks like Southwark, etc., you know, they're going to go good gallop generally, but there are other tracks where Lingfield, etc., you can just gain that little bit of knowledge and a little bit of an advantage. And so I think, you know, I guess for a punter as well, if you can study it, you can gain an advantage as well, I'd imagine.
Yeah, so let's have a chat about one or two of those different all-weather tracks, because they are all different. What kind of horse do you think that you need for Lingfield, for example? Generally, it'll vary, I suppose, regarding trip, but what type of horse is a Lingfield horse?
I think with a Lingfield horse, you need a horse with a little bit of tactical speed, because you generally get quite a lot of falsely run races around there, and you see sometimes they can really stack the pace up down the back and then get running off the turn there, and you need a horse that's quite well balanced, because they often loop around that turn pretty quickly, and it can take an inexperienced horse out of their comfort zone and get them unbalanced. But probably similar to Wolverhampton in a certain respect as well, and you need that kind of nippy horse where they're quite well balanced and they relax well as well. So I think that probably suits Lingfield best, to be honest. And sometimes in those novices, you can see these Gosden and etc. horses get beat around there because they just lack a little bit of tactical awareness and a little bit of experience, where you can beat them on probably a slightly more battle-hardened horse.
And is somewhere like Chelmsford and Kempton that are flatter, more galloping tracks, I suppose, is that more likely to be the track where the best horse does win, and it's maybe a little bit of a fairer test?
Yeah, I think so. Kempton, I think it's a lovely track, lovely fair track, and generally the best horse wins. You've got a lovely big long back straight and a sweeping turn and a nice free furlong running. So it's a fairly fair track, and you don't get too many hard luck stories, but bar the inner track, that is.
Yeah, the inner track has got much shorter straight, much tighter, and you need to be handier there, don't you?
Yeah, the inner track's it's not a particularly nice track, to be honest. The 5 furlongs is very quick, the bend's sharp, and draw for the mile and a quarter and the 5 is quite vital, really. So it's not. I don't think it's a lot of jockeys' favourite track in the world.
And what about Chelmsford? Because you said that Kempton seems fair. You kind of dived over Chelmsford a little bit. Do you feel that that's maybe a bit more of a specialist track?
Yeah, I think Chelmsford, obviously, I think a lot of people have highlighted, I think Chelmsford, the surface isn't fantastic. The prize money's great, but the surface is a little bit dead, a little bit worn, and I always find with Chelmsford it rides different week to week, and at one stage it was a little bit of a one-dimensional track where you needed to be on the front end, but week in, week out it rides slightly different, so it's difficult to get a real handle on Chelmsford, I feel.
And what about Southwell? Because if there's a front runner's track around, it's there.
Yeah, obviously Southwell's quite a one-dimensional, real specialist track, and I always think them American pedigree horses seem to come to the fore there. And say when you get a horse that's a real specialist and loves it around there, it can count for a huge amount.
And what about Newcastle? Obviously, you've got the straight track, the round track. Is that the stiffest of the lot of them?
Yeah, Newcastle, beautiful big track, and obviously you see plenty of big Newmarket powerhouses sending nice horses there, and there's no reason, there's no surprise to see why, really, because that big galloping track's a fair track. The best horse generally wins, and the only thing about it is you do get a lot of steadily run, false run races, but a lot of people generally are a little bit pessimistic about making a run in there, and I think sometimes you can nick a race by getting some soft fractions up, on the front end there.
Yeah. Which of the all-weather tracks do you like best?
I like Lingfield because I just feel that you can sometimes win race on horses that possibly shouldn't win them. So I just like that kind of edge there, the way you can get a bias and get an edge on sometimes on some horses and some jockeys.
Yeah. So you see, I think a lot of it maybe depends on the kind of rider you are. A lot of people, based on what you said, I kind of expected you to say Kempton then, just because it was the fairest track. But I guess you're looking at it thinking, if I'm not on the best horse at Kempton, I ain't got as good a chance. Whereas at Lingfield, I can maybe do something that makes me win.
Exactly. Like I say, if you just study that bit harder and try and figure out how you can gain an edge, then I think Lingfield's the perfect place for it. And if you are on the best horse, you generally, if you're in the first 3 or you make the run in, you're in the right spot. So I just feel it's a place where you can just gain an edge a bit more. Yeah,
we've discussed a couple of the things there that I said there were a few things that you're best known for. We've said about Smart Press, we've spoken about the all-weather. We'll come on to another of those in a minute, your style of riding. But seeing as we've started talking about it, I think something that a lot of punters won't be aware of, because why would they be, is, to my mind, one of your biggest assets is your tactical astuteness, and you've mentioned it on a couple of occasions there. And having ridden for me and my brother and friends in the past, I know how much work you put into a race before it started. Do you see that as one of your biggest edges in the saddle?
I think so, yeah, and I think that I think in any sport, whether you're a footballer, a cyclist, whatever, I think you've got to obviously try and gain an edge on your competitors in any way you can, because it's a game of fine margins, and I think that is somewhere where possibly in other countries, Hong Kong, Australia, you know, they probably do study a bit harder, and I think in this country it is lacking a bit. And like say, doing pace maps, etc., I think you can gain an edge. So it's something that I try and apply to my rides as much as I can.
Yeah, look at how they're going to unfold. Do you do a bit of video watching to get to know the horses as well? Do you, either ones that you're riding and the opposition, do you watch a lot of racing?
I would watch a lot in the car, because like I say, I'm lucky in that I have a driver, so I've got an hour and a half on the way racing to go through numerous races and see, you know, certain horses and how races might develop. And you know, what one thing I find amazing that this day and age is, you might have a weighing room of 30 jockeys, and only five of them will buy a paper, which if you're going out to do a job you're quite well paid for, it's amazing how many of them don't study their races and even know where they're drawn, which in one way I look at it and think, wow, I can really gain an edge here.
Yeah, because I know from having spoken to you pre-race when you've ridden our horses, it's in your mind, as it is in mine as a punter, that, you know, yes, you might be badly drawn in 12 round Wolverhampton, but you've worked out who's on the inside of you, who's going to miss the break, who's going to go forward, and where you might be able to slot in. So it's not just a knowledge of your own horse, it's the others as well. And I guess what you're saying is that by putting in that work, if others aren't, you have got an edge.
Yeah, I think so, and I think probably riding for Samart probably instilled that with me a lot more, because he's very big into how races will run and how races will develop. So I think riding for him's probably almost stepped it up a gear in terms of studying races and trying to plan ahead.
Sounds like the other thing that they're kind of tied into each other. The other factor that I would sort of associate with you is being on top of generally the form book and horses' pedigrees, and it sounds as though that started from a very young age, if you were just absorbed by the sport from being 6 or 7.
Yeah, like I say, from probably 6 or 7, I was, you know, I'd be looking at race cards and watching racing, and you know, been probably a bit of a form and pedigree student from then, and like I say, it developed in, you know, like I say, I pinhooked a couple of horses, etc. And you know, it is something that I'm generally quite into and quite keen on. So hopefully, you know, hopefully it helps me in my racing. You know, obviously riding it can, you know, serve me later in life when I choose to do something else.
If you hadn't have been small and light and had the opportunity to get into the sport in the way that you have, if you were not built for riding like I'm not, would you have been absorbed by the sport in the same way anyway, do you think?
I think so, yeah, because I think I generally do love the horse and love the sport. So I'm sure in some sort of position I'd have been in sport. What and how, I've no idea, but I'm fairly certain I'd have been in some sort of capacity.
I've got a thing to do after I've spoken to you this afternoon for Racing TV. It's a virtual Dante, right? 10 of the best Dante winners from the last 30 years.
I did see the field. Yeah, I did see the field.
Who do you reckon is going to win it? I was going to give you the field, but who?
I was growing up. I was a big Saki fan, and I remember him. I remember I had £2 on him to win the Derby when I was about 8 years old, and I love Saki. So there's probably a touch of bias, but I would go for Saki.
Yeah, he's well up my shortlist. I think in terms of you've got to base it to some degree with him, what he ended up doing when he went and won an arc by a mile, didn't he, and stuff like that.
Yeah, I guess in a virtual Dante, at that stage of his career, he would have probably got beat, but he probably ended up the best of the lot of them, I feel.
Yeah, the thing that I've got to find out is, to try and get this right, is what they're basing it on. Is it the Dante performances, or is it what they ended up doing? Because I think it brings around a different result. But you'd be Saki as the best horse on that field.
I think eventually, yeah. I remember when they did the Kentucky Derby Legends race. I couldn't see how Secretariat couldn't win it, and he duly did.
See if you're right about this one then. As I say, it all depends how it works out. Once I've finished speaking to you, I've got to go and have a study up and decide what I think was the best of that lot. The other thing that you're well known for is your style of riding. It's not hard to spot you, in truth, particularly in a close finish. Is that just something that you kind of, it's just like your own style? It wasn't taught by anyone. It's just how you ended up riding a horse.
Yeah, I just think that I'm probably not the most natural rider, and I think some people like Andrea and Frankie, they're that bit small, and they're generally just built. They are literally built to ride horses, and I probably have to work a little bit harder to as I'm not the most natural, but it's just what's comfortable with me, really. I feel that there are times when I feel, maybe I should just tighten up and try and be a little bit more streamlined, but I just think it would probably take it away from me as a rider, as that's what I'm comfortable with, and I can gain the best results by doing that. So I might look back in 20 years and say, why didn't I do it? And I would have possibly won more races or ridden better winners, but I feel it's what I'm comfortable with, and it serves me quite well.
Yeah, does the attention it gets ever bother you? Because people will talk about it sometimes, like particularly when the whip rules changed, there was a particular sort of people started looking at just generally how people were using their stick. And you were someone that on a couple of occasions got a little bit of stick about it. Does that ever bother you? Because actually your record on whip rule breaches isn't bad at all, is it?
No, like I say, my disciplinary record is almost exemplary, really. I usually get about 1 or 2 a year, which when you're having 1,000 to 1,500 yards is unbelievable, really. But obviously, it's not ideal, and say, I have been working on it because I was trying to tighten up while I've been off, and hopefully, if that does, it might entice me to get a few better rides and better races. But I kind of feel that now I've almost been tired with that brush. That people have got their opinion now. So like I say, I'd love to tighten up a bit and be a little bit more streamlined, but I almost feel that people have almost made their mind up to a certain extent, and that's what it is a bit now.
Yeah, so it's kind of like, what's the point? Because as you say, it's effective. You ride a lot of winners. 2015 was it? You rode in the calendar year more winners than anyone.
Yeah, like I say, I think 2015 and 16 I rode 189 winners. But both years. So like I say, it certainly doesn't affect me riding winners, and obviously it serves me quite well.
In a sense, it must be, I'm sort of putting words in your mouth a little bit, but it must be a bit frustrating, because you said there about getting on some better horse and things like that. You're riding a lot of winners. From speaking to you, and everyone will be aware of the amount of work now that you're putting into it beforehand. Does it grate a little bit that basically a style perception might occasionally stop you getting on some of those better horses in better races on the way?
I guess it can be frustrating from time to time, but I guess the flip side of the coin is obviously I know that if I were to tighten up, potentially it would get me on better horses. So I guess in a certain extent the ball's in my court, but I just feel that it would almost take it away from me a little bit as a rider, in that sometimes, for instance, some horses, Mark said, these big elephants that need plenty of stoking up, and to get the best out of him, you've got to be quite aggressive and quite strong on him to almost get him to engage top gear. And I mean, some riders might not suit them type of horses, and if I'm riding them sorts of horses, I need to get the best out of them, and potentially that is the best way.
Yeah. So if you were sort of looking at a horse that you think you can get more out of than someone else, everyone's got a style that a horse would suit. Jockeys can ride in different ways, but you mentioned Jamie Spencer earlier on. Everyone associates with him with a patient ride, and a horse that wants covering up and smuggling into a race effectively suits Spencer down to the ground. What is the Luke Morris horse?
I would. I think I often get told when I ride horses, "Oh, this horse has been crying out for you," in that they're a little bit lazy, possibly a little bit quirky, and they kind of need, someone fairly strong and who can get the best out of them. But in the same respect, that there are certain horses. Like I remember horses this winter I did very well on. I think I won 3 or 4 on him, Toro Dorado, and he was a horse that you couldn't hit him, which probably some people try to tie me the brush that because my stick action is a little bit refined. People think, oh well, he obviously uses stick a lot, which just because you can note it doesn't mean it happens a lot. And for instance, a horse like him, he needed smuggling into the race, dropping out, and not being hit. Which I guess if you said that to people, they would say, "Oh, well, that's certainly not a Luke Morris horse." But I think I'd like to think that I can adapt to whichever horse suits.
Yeah, I was just looking over my shoulder.
It's almost similar to Jamie Spencer. I think he gets tired a little bit with that hold-up horse type, but I think he's equally as good from the front.
He's brilliant from the front. He just doesn't do it as often as what he holds him up, I suppose.
Yeah.
I was just looking there over my shoulder as you were speaking. The picture in the middle is you on Hakam in Norway winning that Group 3 for us. You weren't even allowed to carry your stick, so you just adapt.
Yeah, exactly. Like I say, that was a fantastic day, and a superb bit of placing from yourself and Mick to win a Group 3 with a horse that was a handicap.
Exactly, he wasn't a Group 3 horse, was he?
No, fantastic day.
How many attempts did you have to go for the old flexi blinkers?
I think I had to go for 3, but thank God we put them on. Jesus, it made a difference.
Yeah, it did. For those who aren't aware what we're talking about here, it's in Scandinavia they don't use a whip necessarily. They certainly don't in Norway. But these flexi blinkers, the blinker isn't necessarily on at the start, and you kind of pull a cord and they flick round, and it was like the turbos kicked in with old Hakam that day. It was fantastic day. Career highlights. He won't be one of them. Gilt Edge Girl and Marsha, 2 sprinters that you won your Group 1s on. They definitely would be. Yeah,
like say two literally chalk and cheese fillies. Gilt Edge Girl, she went from middle of the road handicapper to Group 1 winner in a short space of time, and she came at a time in my career when I'd lost my claim, and she gave my first Group 3 winner, then went on to win a Group 1, and so she was a fantastic filly for me to almost put me onto that different level of riding in better races and better horses. And like I say, equally Marsha, she was probably the most talented horse I've ever ridden, and she gave me some fantastic days, a trip to the Breeders' Cup, and she was she was a rocket. Yeah, you mentioned there that chalk and cheese. Really, what were the key attributes of each horse? Gilt Edge Girl, she was a little bit lazy. She wasn't very big. Probably wasn't a very impressive individual. If you put her up against what you would see as a good sprinter, she didn't fit the bill. But she was tough, hardy, and she tried very hard, and that probably counted for a lot in her. And whereas Marsha was as a specimen, she was perfect. She was elegant, tall, leggy, plenty of muscle, and she had an unbelievable turn of foot and a lot of speed. So she was a very talented filly. When you won 2 Group 1s on her, didn't you? Yeah, she won the Abbey and the Nunthorpe. When you won the Nunthorpe, Frankie thought he'd won. Did you think you'd won? I honestly wasn't sure, but obviously when I glanced across, you don't expect Frankie to get it wrong. So I was absolutely distraught for 20 seconds or so. Do you ever bring that up with him now? No, I'd never ever said. I don't think it was ever once mentioned again.
Was it not?
No, never.
You said there that she was sort of the perfect specimen. 6 million guineas, I think, she went through the ring for. Coolmore bought her. Did you go and see her sold?
Pardon?
Did you go and see her Did you go and see her the day she was sold? Did you go to tap?
Yeah, tonight it was. I was actually. I shouldn't really say this, but I was actually riding at Wolverhampton that day, and I think I had a couple of rides in the first 3 races, and then I had something that was very slow in the last race. I can't remember for the life of me whose. So I actually got the doctor to sign me off with 2 fate, hot-footed it back, and just made it back in time for it to go through the ring to make 6 million. So it was a euphoric moment, and I'll never witness a moment like it before and again.
Yeah, you haven't done before, and you won't again. Do you know who covered her?
She went to Galileo the first year and slipped, but then she produced another foal to Galileo this year. So there's a Galileo at foot.
So it would have been the case if she hadn't slipped the first foal. It would have been due to hit the ground on the track this year, wouldn't it?
It would have been this year, yeah.
But we're now going to have to wait for a first progeny to see the racecourse to next year, assuming it runs at 2.
Yeah, and like I say, you'd think obviously Galileo to a speed mare, it's a recipe for success usually.
Yeah, absolutely. Prince of Lear was another big winner for you. 2016 Norfolk winner for Robert Cow. What was he like?
Yeah, he was my first Royal Ascot and only winner so far, and he was a proper 2-year-old. He was a fast breezer, clocked a electric breeze at Doncaster. And Robert prepared him perfectly. He won the Brian yearly conditions race first time, then won the Norfolk a few weeks later. And he was a fast 2-year-old. He was quite small, but he was prepared perfectly for the breeze by Conmanane, and then going forwards by Robert.
Yeah, and there's those 3. They're kind of the biggest winners. You mentioned there's other listed and group winners along the way. You said about Juniper Girl, probably quite a key horse early on. Which other horses have been particularly special to you?
There was one horse when I was actually apprentice that probably did me the world of good. An old horse called Matsunasuki. He was a good old sprinter, and Karen McAvoy actually did really well with him. But I had a few good days on him, and the chap that trained him, I knew him from when I was 12 years old. Scobie Coogan. He used to deliver the feed to Michael Bales when I was 12, and I used to help him unload the lorry and etc. And he always used to say, "I'll give you rides, boy," and you never think anything of it. And wind the clock forward, probably 6 years later, he gave me my first listed winner on Matsunasuki, and I won numerous Class 2s on him. And he was actually quite a Scobie. He was a jockey. He rode a few winners as a jump jockey, but he always gave me plenty of good advice, and a lot of good advice along the way. And I always look back and fondly on riding him a listed winner, really. Yeah,
that's a great little story, and it just means something a little bit extra for a small yard like that as well, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think it was the only horse he had, and I think he ended up getting up to a mark of 112, which, when you've got one horse and it's rated 112, was a hell of an achievement for him.
It's quite clear that you're absolutely immersed in the sport and basically have been for your whole life. What ambitions have you got for the future?
Like I say, I'd love to. I'm closing in on 2,000 winners now, which I think I need about another 200 or 300, which would be fantastic to do that. And so I think if I were to get to 100 winners this year, which it's not going to be that easy, obviously with the way the season started, etc. But that would be 10 consecutive years. So that'd be a great thing to do. And I think obviously you're always aiming to ride more Group 1 winners and get on good horses. So hopefully there's some good horses to come round the corner, and just keep on, stay fit, healthy and happy, and ride plenty of good winners.
Assuming that you get the good grace to have health and fitness on side, given how light you are, do you see yourself being a jockey for a good while longer, or can you see a situation where eventually you decide that you want to have a crack at training? Have you thought about
that? Training is, obviously, I think when you love racing so much, training is obviously always going to be possibly an option for you. But I think it's difficult to go from when you're riding hundreds of winners, 100+ winners every year, to then starting off with probably 5 0 to 60 horses or 10 0 to 60 horses. So I think it's something I'd consider, but I wouldn't want to start with 5 horses rated 50 and then you're almost back at the bottom again and struggling away. So as long as I'm riding plenty of winners, enjoying it, and doing well, I'd love to keep riding for quite a long while longer.
Yeah, so it's basically career trajectory in the saddle is going to determine whether or not you end up training. If that, for whatever reason, dried up, then you try your hand at that. But as it is, you're happy doing as you're doing. Exactly,
like I say, I'm riding 100 winners each year, and I've got a good job. So like I said, I'd love to keep going for a good while longer anyway. Good stuff. We're just about done, Luke. Got a few quick fire questions for you to quickly answer. So, what was your first ride? My first ride was a filly called Royal Pardon at Folkestone, apprentice handicap. First winner? First winner was Carefully Girl at Southall. How long after your first ride was that? That was my 8th ride. She was favourite. Jumped out, made all Southall. How long did it take to Sylvester de Sousa had the same thing? Not his first winner, but his first British winner was. I think he said he won 10 lengths last week. That was at Southall as well. It seems to be a place for people to ride their first winner. Yeah, I think she won about 6 lengths. I must have looked around about 10 times as well, just praying for the post to come. Can sometimes seem like a long time, those late stages at Southall, can't it? It did, especially being I think she was about a 50 rated filly, which it felt forever on her. How long did it take you to ride out your claim? I think about two and a half years or so, 2.5, 3 years. Yeah. Jockey you admire the most? Probably Ryan Moore. Ryan Moore, for just sheer talent and ability. I think his approach as well. He's professional, and I think he's the model jockey. Most underrated jockey. Most underrated jockey. You say yourself if you want. I think Louis Stewart. I think he's a good talented rider, and probably doesn't get the opportunities he deserves. Yeah, he started out at Michael Bell's, didn't he? He started at Michael Bell's, yeah, and he's got a good connection now with Sir Michael Stout. So he could well get a few more opportunities there this year. Best young rider. I think best young riders. I think Tom Marquand's a little bit of a it's a no-brainer really. And what about someone with a claim? I think someone with a claim. I think Angus Villiers is very talented. Still very young, but I think he's quite a talented young rider. Best ride you've ever given a horse? Best ride. I think it was on a horse called Moscato. He won a mile 6, 0 to 65 or something round Nottingham, and I pushed him for the full mile 6. He nearly stopped and ran out 2 or 3 times, and he ended up being rated 100 in the end. But on that day, he was tough work. Yeah. Worst ride you've given one? The worst ride. I don't know. I'm sure there's a few candidates along the way. I can't think of one off the top of my head. Can't think of one. Which horse do you wish you'd ridden that you didn't, and why? I think everyone would have loved to have ridden Frankel. Yeah, just because he's the best. He's unbelievable. I've never seen any horse that with that sheer talent. No, he was an unbelievable talent. Last thing for you to pass on to us, Luke, if it's all right, 2 or 3 horses to follow, which if people have been listening with us to this point, I would think they'll have their pen and paper at the ready by now, because these are likely to be horses that are
got a little bit in hand or going to do something based on the knowledge that you've got of them. So what have you got for us?
The first filly I'm going to put across is a filly called Dream Loper of Ed Walker's. She's never ran, but she's a beautifully bred filly. I won a Lister race on her dam, and she's by Lope de Vegas. She's lovely bred, and she's been working well. And I think she's a filly that, you know, can have a good year, and hopefully she might be, you know, quite a nice filly. And second horse I'm going to put forward is a horse I'm looking forward to the year ahead, called Pride of America. I won a novice on him round Wolverhampton. He's very impressive, and I hope that he can be a horse that can step up to a good level and have a good year. And the third one is a little bit of a sleeper that I hope he's quite well handicapped. Is a Midland Park horse called The Heart Never Lies. He's had 3 runs, rated under 60. He looks a proper horse this year. He looks like he's done really well from 2 to 3, and he could well have a bit in hand.
Excellent stuff. So that's 3: The Heart Never Lies, Dream Loper, and Pride of America. Luke, thanks a lot for chatting to us. Thanks for your honesty and your insights, and catch up soon, hopefully.
Perfect. We'll hopefully see you soon. Hopefully everyone enjoyed the podcast.
Let's hope so. Thanks, Luke.
Perfect. Thank you. Cheers.